Welcome to the Beacon Way podcast, hosted by award-winning executive team of Beacon Media and Marketing. With over 3 decades of experience, Adrienne, Jennifer, and Ken give you an insider's view of what's working, what's not, and what's on the horizon for digital marketing. Grow your business today with the Beacon Way podcast. All right. I am so excited to get this podcast going and this new series for the Beacon Way podcast with the three of us, right? The partners here at Beacon. And it's hard to put it all into words what my hope and vision for this is going to be. I'll start out by introducing myself. My name's Ken Okonek. I'm one of the partners here at Beacon. And my main role, and maybe you guys have different perspectives on this, is driving new business, the CRO, right? Chief Revenue Officer. So everything around retention, sales, and growth of the company as we're growing along this wild ride. Adrienne, what about you?
Yes, Adrienne Wilkerson. I'm one of the co-founders and one of the current owners. And my role primarily is CEO. I get to do a lot of the vision casting around here and a lot of the buck stops here, final decision kind of world, which I really enjoy actually.
Jennifer Christensen, CMO and CIO. So the dual role between working on innovation for our company, always pushing forward. Obviously, the three of us are all involved in that, but I try to stay ahead of what's happening and bring it to the team. And then Chief Marketing Officer, that has really evolved over the years. And a lot of my work is mainly on just making sure that the overall marketing we're doing for Beacon is successful and marketing Beacon itself. So yeah. I love both of those things. Those are my two happy places.
Fun places to be in for sure, especially now.
Yeah.
So I know in the first episode that we wanted to kick off in this was really juggling communication styles between 3 different personality types as partners, right? We're all running this wild ride of a company as it's growing and the team's growing, and we're all very different. And that has its unique challenges, right? So I know that there's a lot of business owners that I talk to that ask, how do we do it based on what they see Beacon doing? And so I'm excited to unpack that and really double click into that for a lot of people. So where do we want to start? Adrienne, Jen, is there a certain spot that makes sense to you guys to talk about how do we juggle that different type of communication and conflict and all of that?
Yeah, I think one of the most important things that we started doing even from the very beginning, and Ken, you just really brought in a whole nother layer to that, is always having a lot of conversation around identifying that everybody has a different communication style, and that's going to enhance each other, and that's also going to cause conflict. And so we started off doing a communication style back in the day. And then Ken, you really brought Gallup strength profiles into the company, which Jennifer and I had played around with those back in 2015, I think, Jen, but we really only did it once. And it was like, that's great. And then we got really busy. And so I think one of the really beautiful parts that you really brought into the company, Ken, was bringing us back to those and making those a really proactive tool. And one of the most powerful parts of that is having that common language around those strengths profiles and those communication profiles. So using both of those and how they dovetail together. But I would say one of the pieces that's been most impactful for me is really understanding each person's communication styles and strengths profiles and having a common language that takes it out of it being as personal. What do you say a lot of times, Ken? You're the strength in the balcony or the strength in the basement. And being able to have Jennifer go, I think that's one of your strengths, but I think you're in the basement right now on that one, really takes it out of it being kind of an attack to, oh man, yeah, because that's a common language and that's a common thing that I understand. Yeah, my strengths are great up here, but down in the basement, they can actually be really destructive. So that is a good kind of check, I think, that I've watched us use between the three of us, as well as really model that for our company, for the other team members.
Whether it's strengths, communication style, whatever technique it is, I think you nailed it, that it is having a common language that we can all use. It creates distance. Mm-hmm. And what I think that we have that is like a real secret sauce that is very unique is by focusing so much on our personal growth, focusing on how much improvement we're all working and staying in our lanes and staying in those positive strengths and also being able to call each other out. I feel like the really special secret sauce is that each one of us can take that, and it creates emotional awareness, it creates emotional intelligence, and we're all growing. Instead of focusing on, oh, I really don't like that you're doing that or you're coming across that way, it's more, oh, okay, why am I interpreting it that way? Why am I believing that about this situation? And it goes back to my core belief, which is that your company can only be as successful as you have grown personally.
Mhm.
So if you're in leadership as a business owner, like, and not investing in personal growth, not investing in knowing who you are and those pieces, I just don't see any way for you to succeed, because everything that you believe about yourself affects what you believe about other people, is your filter, and your belief of how things work or how you come across, it directly affects the success of your company.
Right.
Basically project yourself into the company, I would say.
And the decisions you make, right? If you've got a negative belief around money, if you've got a negative belief around, I have to work 90 hours a week to achieve certain things, whatever those negative beliefs are, negative or positive, that is going to affect the filtering decisions you make and then how you interact with everybody else.
Because the more you work on yourself and your team hears you referencing books, talking about Vistage groups that you went to, whatever it is, that becomes a process which then feeds into them. And they start to read more books. They start to focus inwardly, which then creates a company and a culture where you have everyone taking responsibility for themselves. And the filtering system, the self-awareness of how they're processing information, which then helps your whole team uplift each other just based on their own focus on personal growth, right? And that's a really exciting thing to see from leadership when your team starts to implement those things. And it starts with the team, right? Because you can only grow as fast as you grow yourself.
What differences did you see in the company, Ken, as you came in and started really bringing the Gallup strength profiles more and more into the company? What was a bit of your journey in that kind of coming in? Because it's been a big part of Jen and I's world, and I think we've modeled it in ways, but we never did anything as intentional as what you brought in.
To Jen's point, what she brought up earlier, is you start to look at lens through more than maybe just yourself, right? I think it's really easy to get in your own little world, and you start to have people thinking about, how am I receiving this information based on my strengths? Okay, what is their strength? Okay, how do I give them information in a way that's better for them? And you start to hear people talking about it. You start to hear them saying, oh, I'm in this strength, or oh, maybe I was going too much into this, right? Maybe I was going way too much into achiever and I was just crossing stuff off the list, but I wasn't looking at the bigger picture. When that common language starts to come out in your team, and you get to start to see them start to have those questions or start to frame questions around how they're operating, you really know it's starting to take hold. And it's really starting to have that ripple effect. And that's definitely what I saw when some of our team members, when they maybe made a mistake and they were coming to me to talk through an operational process, and they were already calling out maybe an area of opportunity in themselves and how we can improve it in the future, which is just such a healthy thing to be a part of in a team that's growing.
Yeah, that's really beautiful.
The last couple meetings I've had with other peers in the community, other business owners, things like that, I'm riffing about 5 dysfunctions of team, or we're talking about some of the things that we've learned, how to have conflict, healthy conflict. And it was really interesting. Both different lunches that I had, both of the people I met with messaged me back later and was like, hey, I really need that. I really need to learn more about that. Like, we're really struggling as a team with these things. And I think it's just something we're not talking about enough. We're not talking about how we get so lost in the weeds of just our business overall that we forget that all of these things are affecting the day to day. It's just hard to stop and take time to deal with it until it's a problem. But it's affecting the day to day, even satisfaction of your job. I love when we're having those level of conversations with our team. It takes all of us out of that, even that boss, employee role, all of that. We're just all human beings trying to be better human beings. And that's a super positive mindset to have all of us in.
Yeah. More time with the people we work with than we spend oftentimes even with our friends and family. Even if we're working remote, we're still interacting so heavily with each other. I feel like it's a huge missed opportunity if we're not just growing professionally, but we're also growing personally. Like Ken said earlier, you can only grow so much professionally until you need to grow personally. You can add skills, you can add knowledge. That's all really powerful. But if you're not growing your character at the same time and you're not going deeper and exercising your emotional intelligence muscles and all of that, there's a limit to what you can do with extra knowledge and extra skills. And when you pair the two together, I think that's a beautiful thing. But it's really understanding that the whole person shows up at work every day, not just work personality, not just work Ken, not just work Adrienne or work Jen, but we all show up as our whole person. And I think that's something that corporate America really lost, is that whole thing of your personal life stops at the door. You walk in the door and you are your work person. And that's just so unrealistic to think that people can separate the two. And I think it's really limited our development as a country and corporately, because we've shut down that personal side. And yeah, it's more messy, but that is that emotional intelligence piece. That is that personal piece that we bring to the table. And to try to separate the two is destructive, I think. I don't think it helps at all. I get it to some degree or another, because the personal is more messy and it's in some ways more challenging to deal with. But I feel like we've discovered day in and day out how valuable that challenge is. Just like what you were saying, Jen, it's hard to stop sometimes and focus on the touchy-feely part without investing in that and going deep there. You're only going to be able to advance so far corporately or as a business without incorporating those pieces. And especially our younger generations, that's where they live. So we're not going to be able to connect with them if we're not willing to have conversations about how crappy somebody's day was yesterday, or their strength down in the basement. And why is their strength down in the basement that day? Is their mom in the hospital? To pretend that stuff doesn't exist outside of work, I think is a huge loss for us as a country and us as businesses.
One of my biggest grievances is that debate between professional growth versus personal growth, right? I would say that professional growth is just a farce, right? You have to work on personal growth, because who you become in the process is what affects professional, right? So if you work on personal growth, that affects professional growth, right? And I think the more you just work on yourself, the more that benefits you professionally. I have those conversations, even with employees of ours, where we get into our quarterly coachings and we talk to people and they're like, I want to start working on professional growth around this, or I want to do this. I'm like, let's stop for a second. Because do you just check in 9 to 5, or do you not have anything personal in work? And obviously our team really becomes aware of that very quickly as they get into our culture. But I would love to normalize that you're you. And if you, like you said, if you're checking into work and all that stuff is checked at the door, that 9 to 5, that's a draining process on a human, right? It takes a lot of work to be someone you're not. And so if you're checking that at the door and you're removing that personal from it, and you're just like business mode on, you're actually probably going to be more drained in work and more drained in home, because you're not being your authentic self.
As a company, we started using Predictive Index, another service that talks about how you operate at work and home and all these different pieces and what brings you personal gratification. It really has highlighted that even on a deeper level for us, that the whole person shows up at work. And that's part of, like, PI stands for Predictive Index, but that's part of their whole model. And it was one of the things that really drew me to them. So I'm like, yes, that's what we keep saying. You all show up at work. It's not just half of you, whatever half you choose to show up with today. It is the whole person. And so I've appreciated how much deeper PI has allowed us to go with each other. And it's just added another nuance to the tools that we're already using to really help understand, are we connecting the right person with the right role, so that they're really feeling fulfilled all the way around. And back to your job satisfaction piece, Jen, they're really showing up happy. And it's because we're able to hopefully connect them with a position where they're feeling that their strengths are used and fully.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a off on this, but I keep thinking about this related to this conversation. My husband and I were having a conversation yesterday about the difference between being smart and being wise. Part of it is definitely my life experience and where I'm at now, and I have a lot more wisdom than I used to, but it's not like I've gotten smarter. I've gotten wiser, and you learn from the mistakes you make, hopefully, but that wisdom is really, I think, the key It's knowing yourself, knowing others, being willing to pause, take a break before you make a decision or you do something, being willing to go deeper. And all that sounds great until you're in the moment. So that's why I think like the predictive index is great, because it's like this tool that we can use. Or I referenced 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. That book was life-changing for me because I used to be terrified of conflict. And when I realized that healthy conflict is growth, is positive, is what moves you forward, I have become so much less agreeable in the last year. And I see the fruit of that. I see like we're doing better. We're making better decisions because I'm not disagreeing. You're not disagreeing. But that is so against the norm, I think, of corporate America. Like you said, that's a totally different mindset where you're not supposed to say anything. You're not supposed to challenge authority. You're just supposed to go along with it and work hard. And that just doesn't work I don't think that works anymore at all, actually.
If we're going to do the humble brag about Beacon. Thank you for joining the Beacon Way Executive Session. New episodes drop every week. Make sure you never miss one. Subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts.